These are the 6 worst places to invest in New Zealand, and after helping tens of thousands of investors analyse properties, I've realised that some areas can make you money while others bleed you dry. So in this episode of the Property Academy podcast, we're going to start by looking at the 6 signs an area is a bad place to invest. And then once we count down the top places to avoid, then you will finally know the number 1 worst place to invest in New Zealand. Now, Andrew, what makes an area really bad as an investment and kind of why?
Now, we are talking quite generally here. There might be exceptions to these rules, but when we're talking about kind of a location being a bad place to invest, we're thinking about whether or not it's got maybe a low population or a shrinking population. If house prices are just overvalued compared to where we'd expect them to be, maybe house prices are really, really expensive, so it's a high barrier to entry. The people there might have low incomes, so it might be a smaller tenant pool that can afford the rent that you need to get. Low gross yields, but you know there's a combination of these things, and sometimes there'll be other factors as well, like natural hazards.
Well, if you think about the worst possible place you could ever invest in, it would have a low population where there aren't that many tenants. The population would be declining, which means you've got the same number of houses, but with fewer people to buy or rent them. You know, the house prices would have gone up massively, well above their fundamental value, and you know those house prices would be quite high, and yeah, as you said, not able to afford those higher rents. And so the way that we've figured out the worst areas to invest is we've started with the data. So I have been looking at every town in New Zealand that's got a population over 10,000, and I am looking at those 6 main factors: how big the population is, where that area sits within its property cycle, the population growth. Is it growing really fast or very slowly? Are house prices high or low? Are incomes high or low? And also that gross yield. And then I've created an equal rating.
Equal rating for everything.
An equal weighting, because I mean, who's to say whether you should weight something twice as much as something else? So for the purposes of this, equal weighting across them all, so we can get into a ballpark from a score of -6 to +6 of like which areas are really good, which areas are really bad. And so we're going to rank them at the moment. So what comes in as the 6th worst place to invest in New Zealand?
Waikanae, which is in the Kapiti Coast.
Okay, and what is it about Waikanae and the Kapiti Coast which means that it might not be a great area to invest right now?
So it's a relatively low population of just under 60,000. As far as where it is in its property cycle, it's not massively overvalued, but it is overvalued by about 5% at the moment. Population growth, it is getting some population growth, but it's on the cooler side of things. Affordability is interesting. So it's still relatively expensive at a kind of average price of $780,000. And the incomes are relatively low. And of course, the other big thing is yield. The yield is kind of 4%. I mean, that's not bad. But once you take all of those factors into consideration, it's not somewhere I'd be rushing into investing right now.
Yeah, so we've given it out of 6 a score of -1.2. And what's interesting is...
How is it out of 6?
Out of -6.
Oh, sorry.
As I said before, if you listen to me, the score goes from -6 to +6. And so out of 6, it is -1.2. It's really interesting about the population growth, because you might say, okay, over the next 25 years, the Kapiti Coast is expected to grow by 7.6%. Some other areas, especially in our top towns, which we will cover next week, the anticipated population growth is up to like 47-ish%.
That's quite big.
So some areas are expected to grow really fast. Other areas over the next 25 years, like in Kapiti Coast, not particularly high. The 5th worst place to invest that we're saying on this list is Whanganui, which is a small town not that far away actually from Kapiti Coast. It's a few hours north, and actually not that far away from my old stomping ground in Hawera in South Taranaki. And the reason we've put Whanganui in number 5 is that while it is really affordable, like if you look at the whole Whanganui district, what we see is that the median sale price is $430,000. And because of that, because house prices are really cheap, the gross yield is also really high at about 6%. But in terms of its capital growth and how fast house prices might increase there, Wanganui has been through a series of property booms. Between about 2017 and 2020, property prices basically doubled, and then after the next over the next few years, they went up another 50% again. And so because you got a double property boom in a row for Wanganui, I'm expecting that property prices are going to be relatively flat there for quite a number of years. And so if your main thing that you're investing for is the property going up in value, I personally wouldn't be investing in the Wanganui district. The other thing that's interesting is, again, with its population growth only expected to go up by 4.5% over the next 25 years. And so that does make me think, okay, they're going to keep building some houses there. But if the population isn't growing that much, maybe there's not quite as much demand for properties, both in terms of buyers and in terms of tenants. But one thing that I'd say is, with a lot of this data, like, it's a bit of a pick your poison, because there's going to be some data you really care about and other data that you don't really care about. And even if we think, okay, this is the 5th worst place to invest in New Zealand by these numbers, we've scored it from -6 to +6. And even the place that is the 5th worst in New Zealand is only getting a score of -1.3. And it's because even in the best areas, there's still some bad data. Even in some of the worst areas, there's still some good data. And so you've got to pick, which one do you really care about?
It also depends a little bit on what kind of investor you are and what you're looking to achieve. Like, if you were going to buy in this area because it's affordable to get a house, right? Like, if your average price is 430 grand, that's cheap. So for some investors who maybe have a limited budget and all they care about is gross yield, well, maybe then that's not a bad place for them to invest specifically. But if you're interested in capital growth over the medium term, then things like population matters, things like the property cycle, they matter a whole lot more. But again, it does depend on what you're specifically looking for.
Now, just before we get into the next worst area, a lot of people ask me, well, this is all fine for you to crunch these numbers, Ed, but how do I get my hands on this data as well? And I think that people really should go and check out Area Analyzer. This is a free tool that we launched for you guys here on the YouTube channel and the podcast, where you can type in any suburb, any region, any district in New Zealand and get live data about what is going on with house prices, with rents in that region, and actually get our area score as well about how good or bad we think a specific area is. We'll drop a link to that down in the description so you can check out the property data in your area. But Andrew, what is the 4th worst place to invest in New Zealand?
Number 4 is Oamaru. And in terms of kind of their population, it's really small. Like, you're talking 24,000 people. As far as where it is in its property cycle, it's overvalued by about 11%. So it's not as overvalued as some areas, but it's definitely somewhere where I probably wouldn't be expecting a whole lot of growth in the short term. Population growth is really, really low at 2% over 20 years.
25 years.
25 years. That would be quite concerning to me. Again, the prices reflect that. So your average price being $420,000, like, that is cheap, again, to buy there. But for me, I'd be really concerned about the fact that, okay, I'm spending quite a lot of money there and the population is really, really quite tight.
And then both in Wanganui and Oamaru, we've got quite low incomes relative to the rest of the country. So the average household income in both of those towns is about $101,000, $102,000. Now, obviously, if one person is earning $100K, that's a very, very good salary, but often this will be 2 earners within the household, and it is just on that lower side. Again, the gross yield is pretty good, 5.8% on average. The one thing I'll just say about the population numbers we're using here as well is this is for the whole district. So Oamaru's in Waitaki district, and Waitaki district has 24,000 people live there. Oamaru will be even smaller. And what's the 3rd worst place to invest?
Now, number 3, and I know this is going to probably upset some people because this is one of the most beautiful places in New Zealand, and lots of you will be spending your holidays there, and that's Wanaka. And look, the reason for Wanaka is, again, there are some things where you might look at it and go, okay, there's some opportunity here. There's a lot of demand. There'll be demand after people come back from holiday and have this dream of buying a holiday home here. but the fundamentals, the numbers don't work for us based on our modeling. So part of that is because it's really, really expensive. Yeah, average property there is almost $1.3 million. Your population, 50,000. I mean, it's not that.
Most of that is in Queenstown, to be fair, as well. Wanaka is much smaller.
And so you've got a small population, really expensive properties. Your income's okay. I guess you'd have to pay good incomes if you've got people there who earn good money to be able to afford to live there. But in terms of where it is in its property cycle, it's like way overvalued. Now, I think part of that, when you look at places like Queenstown and Wanaka, is because sometimes it does break the normal model because people buy into the hype of the location and they're willing to pay over what we would consider the fundamental value. Now, that might continue to be the thing that occurs. However, from an investment standpoint, I want to get as much certainty around the data as possible. And although the data just tells one story, that would be a real concern for me if I were going to invest in Wanaka.
I suppose the other thing is the population in Queenstown Lakes District it's expected to grow quite quickly over the next 25 years. It's expected to increase about 38%. But then you put it into context with the very low gross yields, the fact that house prices are very expensive, so it's going to be harder to get the amount of mortgage you need to go and purchase a property there. And that's how we come to that view.
And I think that's why with a lot of these type of, Queenstown, Wanaka spots where they're really expensive entry-level prices, you see a lot of people trying to justify their investment by using Airbnb rather than just looking at the normal rental market.
The other thing that I'd say is even these places can be really nice places to live, right? Some people might be like, well, I really like Oamaru. It's got a really nice historic part to the village. I've been there too. It's very, very nice. But this is about investing as opposed to deciding whether somewhere's a good place to live or whether somewhere's a bad place to live. And I know this can get quite emotional. I once had a mayor of a small council.
Twice, didn't you?
Yeah, twice actually. Same mayor said, can you please stop putting my towns on your worst places to buy a house in New Zealand? And I'm like, I'm sorry, but the data is what it is. Now, you might just say, well, actually, I think you should look at some different numbers, or actually, I would weight these differently, which is totally fine. And if that's you, send me your spreadsheets. I look forward to watching your YouTube videos as well. But what's next? What is the second worst place to invest in New Zealand? This is going to get up some people's goat too.
Yeah, this is a location where people get passionate about because we spend a lot of time over the summer there and we love it. And then we think this has surely got to be a good place to invest in. That's Taupua. And the population, 42,000 for that region. Property cycle, it's overvalued by almost 10%. The population growth is relatively low at about 10%. Affordability, it's expensive because, again, people fall in love with the location and then probably try and talk themselves into making the rest of the numbers work. But
well, to be fair though, $800,000, I mean, that's about on par with the median area, right? Like median sale price in New Zealand is about 770 grand at the moment, but 800,000 for Taupua. But I think it's the fact that it's actually quite a small town as well. Yeah, the whole district's 42,000, but the actual town itself is just over 20,000, 25,000.
And that's where, like, I'm not against paying more than what the median house price is for New Zealand, so long as there's depth to the economy there. And look, I'm sorry for anyone that is in love with Taupua, it doesn't have the same depth as somewhere like Auckland or Wellington or Christchurch.
And obviously, for everybody listening to the podcast of this, you can't see Andrew in my spreadsheet, but we've been ranking every single stat on whether it's good or bad, right? And if it's good, it's red because it's red hot. If it's blue or it's cold, we're not that interested in investing there. Of the areas we've talked about so far, Taupua is the first one that is basically all blue, where the numbers on average are all a bit not that great. And so that's the reason why we've said, for Taupua, we're going to put it at number 2. And just before we talk about the worst place to invest in New Zealand, the one thing I often say is if you are looking for a plan to invest in property in 2026, your next step is to book a free meeting with one of our financial advisors at Opus, because you can bring your numbers, your goals, what you're doing right now to invest in all of your questions, and then we'll show you the answers and a plan for you to actually invest. If you're into that, click the link down in the description. But Andrew, what is the worst place to invest in New Zealand?
And number one worst place for 2026 is Whakatane. And that's because it's a small town, sluggish growth. The numbers just really aren't that great. So your affordability-wise, you're $730,000 for average price for a really small population of 38,000 for the region. It's a little bit overvalued, like only 1.5%. So that's okay, but kind of the rest of the numbers don't really work. The population growth is horrendous. So it's projected for like less than 2% over the next 25 years. That would be concerning for me if I was wanting to invest there. And again, if you live there and if you're going to buy properties and add some value and flip them, and that's how you're going to make your money, maybe you don't care as much about some of these numbers, but for your average investor who's going to buy and hold or build and hold, these are the numbers that we'd put much more importance on.
Avoiding the worst areas is the first step, but step 2 is to avoid the worst properties in those areas. So if you want to go deeper, make sure you watch the next video where I'll walk you through the worst properties to buy in 2026. Click the link on your screen now.